Okay, does this work? Oh, yes, it does. Excellent. Sorry? Okay, very good. So, hi everyone. My name is Sujato, and for some reason I was asked to come and do the Q&A this evening. I don't know why. There's many wonderful venerables here who are more than competent to do the Q&A. But anyway, people probably thought I was getting too lazy and needed some work to do, so. So I understand that you're mostly from Hong Kong, is that right? Yes. Yes, very good. All from Hong Kong? No. Hang on, well, anyway, mostly. So I have very clear memories of Hong Kong. I visited there when I was 10 years old. Yes, I have a very clear memory. Good toy shops, that's my memory. So, wonderful to see you all here in Perth. And did you all have a good retreat? Yes. Yeah? Did you get enlightened?
Not yet.
He's still got another night to go. Yeah. How can it be good if you're not enlightened? I don't know. Okay, so I suppose I should probably do these questions. Is that right? Okay, very good. Okay, so dear Ajahn Sujato, we hear from others that a certain Buddhist teacher has been dishonest, but no one wants to challenge the teacher. What would the Buddha do? What would the Buddha do? The teacher's been dishonest. Crikey. Well, the first thing that the Buddha would do would be, and this is something, these kinds of situations are dealt with constantly in the Vinaya, and it's one of the reasons why studying the Vinaya is actually very useful, because the Vinaya isn't, when people think of the Vinaya, they think of like lists of rules for monks and nuns, you know, you can't eat in the afternoon and you have to do this and so on and so forth. But actually a lot of the Vinaya is all about just a way of being able to live well and be able to live in harmony and to be able to apply the Dhamma. And so the Vinaya gives you a lot of detail on how to apply the Dhamma in all kinds of very, very practical ways, such as how to keep the toilet clean, okay? And all of those kinds of things. So one of the things, of course, that happens in the Sangha, you know, people do the wrong thing, or there's rumours and things like that. And so the first, number one thing that the Buddha would do would be to ask the monk to come to him and say, is it true? Seems quite simple, doesn't it? Yeah? But be honest, when was the last time that you did that? Yeah? When was the last time that you heard of a rumour and the first thing you did was to go to that person and say, is this true? Yeah? Just that very simple thing. You realise how powerful the Buddha's approach to all these things was, how much suffering and confusion and misunderstanding that we can get over just by asking. Yeah? So if you think someone's been dishonest, that's the first thing to do. You go and see them and you say, I've heard this rumour, is it true? That's a starting point. Yeah? And sometimes they might say, well, look, yes, it is true. Sometimes they might say, no, it's not true. You know, sometimes there might be more things that need to be done, but at least you've got a starting point. And if you haven't done that, you know, in a way, this is kind of it's like in the legal system, you have the presumption of innocence, right? So you have to basically assume that somebody's innocent until proven guilty. And if you're just going around believing and acting on rumours, they're basically, you're not giving them a chance to speak out. So first thing to do is you go and at least listen to what they have to say. Even if they lie to you again, oh well, what can you do? But at least you give them a go. All right. Good luck. Okay. Ajahn Brahm mentioned that when painful and negative thoughts and feelings arise in our meditation, we have the chance to transform. How do we bring about the transformation? Well, you don't have to really bring anything about, because things transform by themselves. I don't know if you've heard of this little thing the Buddha said called impermanence. Ever heard of impermanence? Try to make them not transform, right? If thought comes up and say, I'm going to hold on to this thought forever, I can guarantee you within about 2 seconds you'll have forgotten it. Yeah? You say a feeling comes up and you think, I'm going to keep this feeling exactly as it is and never change it. Yeah? A few seconds later, it's something else. Things transform all the time. It's just conditionality. You don't have to do anything about it. So all we have to do is to just not get too caught up in it, and not to think that things are too important. And when we come to meditation, this is one of the tendencies that we have, because our whole world exists inside us, right? You're sitting there all day, and it's just what's happening inside your own body and your own mind. And everything that happens starts to become incredibly important. You have a tiny little itch on your left arm, and that's like such an important, you're struggling. I'm sitting here struggling. Do I scratch this itch or do I not scratch this itch? And then you scratch it and then you think, oh God, that was so terrible. I've lost my mindfulness. And all these tiny, tiny little things that are so meaningless and irrelevant become so huge. Yeah? So this is actually a symptom of your mind changing. Your consciousness is changing, so that your sense of values, the sense of what is important and what is significant in your mind, changes. Right? That's what meditation is supposed to do to you. It's supposed to change things. Yeah? So as we're going along, this can happen in all kinds of different ways, and it's important not to get too caught up in it. Don't get too self-involved about your meditation. It's just meditation. It's just your mind, right? It's just conditions. They come and they go. Don't worry. It's nothing to do with you. Right? So don't worry about transforming anything. Okay, where are we? Ajahn Sujato, what prompted you to become a Buddhist monk? Thank you. What prompted me to become a Buddhist monk? Well, there's a long story and a short story behind this. The long story, nobody has ever heard. And it's far too interesting and, dare I say, shocking to share with any of you, so I'm just not going to do that. Short story, how did I become a Buddhist monk? Well, it's just I could begin with the day I was born and move on from there or whatever, but the first time that anybody told me I should become a monk was when I was at I was staying at a guest house in Chiang Mai. I'd done my first meditation retreat, and at this guest house I'd got to know the people who were running the guest house, and I was a guitar player, as a musician, and they were being visited. The childhood friend of the owner of the guest house was a very famous musician in Thailand, actually. He was in one of Thailand's biggest rock bands. And so he came to visit the guest house, and everybody sitting were playing guitar and so on. And somebody lit up a joint, and they're handing it around the table. And then they handed it to me, and I looked at it and passed it to the next person. And so the owner of the guest house just said to me, "Oh, you should be a monk." So that's the short version. So why did I become a monk? Why? I find it very difficult to answer a question, because why would you not want to become a monk? Why didn't you become a monk or a nun? I mean, becoming a monk or a nun is obvious, of course. Samsara is full of suffering, bills and jobs and traffic jams, and why? I can't understand why people don't ordain. It's ridiculous. Anyway, okay. What is it like being Ajahn Brahm's disciple? Oh, crikey. Okay, what is it like being Ajahn Brahm's disciple? Well, I've been Ajahn Brahm's student or his disciple for a long time now, not necessarily a very good one, but anyway, I've been hanging around him for a while, since after I first met him I've been a monk for about 3 years. I was in Thailand, and Ajahn Brahm, of course, was already in Perth, but he would visit Thailand from time to time, and I met him one of his visits there. And already at that time, I'm not sure if you're that familiar with the kind of the history of Bodhinyana and so on, but when they first started, and during the 80s and early 90s, actually the first abbot, Ajahn Jagaro, was the main teacher here. And Ajahn Brahm wasn't really well known for his teachings, but then around sort of the early 90s, mid-90s, which was the time I ordained, I became a monk in 94, then Ajahn Brahm first started teaching, and he was the first monk at that time to really start teaching about jhanas, and the first one in our tradition also to start teaching based on the suttas. And these were the things that I was very interested in, so I felt an immediate connection with his teaching and with what he was doing. And it was purely a coincidence, because Perth is actually my hometown, right? I was born in Perth. But there was purely a coincidence that I happened to have that connection with him. And so there's those things, but also when I was living in Thailand, I did my knees in. I was on crutches because of my sitting meditation. And it was very difficult in Thailand because you're always kind of sitting on the floor, and it's really hard to sort of get by. Anyway, so because of all of those things together, I asked if I could come and stay in Bodhinyana Monastery, and I had an operation on my knee when I came back and so on. So that was how I ended up here. And one of the things which immediately I noticed when I first came to Bodhinyana, as compared to the monastery I was ordained in, was Wat Nanachat in Thailand. First thing I noticed was how warm the monastery felt, not temperature warm, but like kind warm. And the monks were just very friendly. And it might sound kind of crazy, but a lot of monasteries, monks aren't very friendly. And certainly the monastery I grew up in, didn't have a reputation for being very friendly at all. I don't mean that as a criticism. I actually enjoyed my time there a lot, but it's just somehow different. It's a different kind of vibe. And so when I came here, the monks were really kind of warm and very helpful, and I felt a real immediate sense of connection with the community here, with Ajahn Brahm and his teachings and what he was doing. And so one of the things which, of course, you learn when you're with a teacher is you learn all the kind of the little things which you don't. I'd already kind of heard about the big things, right? His teachings on dependent origination and jhanas and things like this, and I always thought those things were wonderful. But when you came here, some of the things you just notice. For example, when we would go into town or something like that, we would stop off at the Serpentine post office and to drop off some mail or pick up the mail or something like that. And Ajahn Brahm would always be the first one to jump out of the car and go and pick up the mail, right? And it's a very small kind of thing, right? But to me it's very indicative that he would just kind of do that. It was actually quite different behaviour than I was used to seeing from senior monks in Thailand. And very often what I'd seen, and I certainly don't think this is always the case, but in the limited experience that I had, that the senior monks would kind of always expect somebody to do something for them. And Ajahn Brahm never would. He would just go out and do it himself. And another thing I noticed about being with him was that I remember another experience when they were doing some building work on one of the huts. And Ajahn Brahm was a builder. He sort of built all the early buildings and stuff in the Bodhinyana monastery. And even last time I taught a retreat here, actually, it's the second last time now I taught a retreat. The day I finished the retreat, Ajahn Brahm was on the roof of the teacher's cottage doing the gutters. So he still does it when he can. And he was just kind of laughing about it, saying how stiff and sore he felt doing it. He's too old, but he just does it because he finds it fun. So but I remember last time I was here, and you go to this building site, and monks are doing bricklaying, and there's like 4 or 5 monks there, And I remember this very distinctly, that all of the monks were talking about arupa jhanas, about formless attainments. And they were all discussing these things and arguing about arupa jhanas, except for Ajahn Brahm, who was laying bricks. And I'm sure of all those monks, there was probably only one of them who actually went back to his hut afterwards and actually did those things, and the other ones who probably didn't. And again, that was just something that was really a characteristic that I've seen from Ajahn Brahm, is that whatever he does, he'll do it 100%, and when he's with somebody, he'll be with them 100%, and when he's doing something, he'll do it 100%. And he'll also drop it 100%. And this is something, I remember one time, I was very naughty when I was in the monastery last time. Do you want to know what I did that was naughty? Why do you want to know what I did that's naughty? You should know what I wanted to do. It was good. Why do you want to know about naughty things? It's terrible. Okay, but we had, for the rains retreat, we were supposed to go back to our huts at 7 o'clock after the tea time. And I actually stayed one night and was talking about Dhamma with one of the other monks until 7:30 after the tea time. I know, it's very evil, isn't it? But anyway, there we were talking about Dhamma. And the light was on, and Ajahn Brahm had seen the light from his kuti and had thought that the light had been left on. So again, he came down to switch the light off, right? So, and then sort of said, "Oh, you shouldn't be talking. You should go back to your huts." And I felt so guilty, that Ajahn Brahm had sort of had to come out from his hut and so on to come down just because we hadn't been keeping the rules. And I remember that, the next morning I saw him again, and I apologised to him, of course, at the time. And I remember the next morning I saw him again, and I said, "Ajahn, I just wanted to say sorry again for that." And he said, "What are you talking about? I've forgotten." Yeah. So I'd been kind of worried about this, but he just had let it go. And this is absolutely what he does. Sometimes people don't appreciate the extent to which, when he's talking about these things, he actually does it. Like, he actually doesn't hold a grudge at all. And when we had this difficulty a few years ago with the bhikkhuni ordination and things like that, and you can see if Ajahn Brahm just let everything go. If the monks at Papang or Thailand said, "Okay, let's forget it and move on," he'd be fine. It'd be nothing. It's all gone straight away. There's no holding on to any of those things at all. And so, to me, these are some of the things that I sort of remember really well, and I've tried to practice them to what extent that I can. But it's always like there's something which is there's a quality which he brings to things, which which to me is expressed just as much in how he lives and how he acts as it is in how he actually teaches. So anyway, there's just a few stories about Ajahn Brahm. Please don't ask him what it's like having Ajahn Sujato as a student. Okay, next question. When I meditate, I vaguely see a purple light. Please explain. Vaguely see a purple light. Yes. So don't worry about it, just keep on going with your meditation. Yeah. All kinds of things will happen while you're meditating. They're not all that important, so don't worry about it too much. If the light's purple or pink or red or green or whatever, it doesn't really matter too much. But the main thing there is the adjective is vaguely, or adverb actually. Vaguely see it. If you're vaguely seeing something, then it's not really powerful and not really clear. But the important thing is just to not get distracted by anything like that in your meditation. Just keep on going with your basic meditation. And if you're watching your breath, you just keep on coming back to your breath. Don't worry about it. The real nimitta, when it comes up, will be unmistakable and certainly won't be vague. Why is it that when we meditate we sit on the floor cross-legged? Is it better than sitting on a chair to meditate? Well, what do you think? Is sitting on the floor better or on a chair? Venerable sitting on a chair cross-legged, so he's got the best of both worlds. You meditate twice as fast then, you sit in both postures. Just whatever, it doesn't matter too much, right? So the Buddha said to be mindful in every posture. Walking, standing, sitting, lying down. Okay, so you can meditate in whatever posture you want. So the main thing is that your meditation should be alert and relaxed. Okay, so it has to have those two things. If you're too comfortable, then you won't be alert and you'll fall asleep. But if you're not, if you're too tight, too tense, then you won't be relaxed. Right? So this is what you have to have: 100% alertness and 100% relaxation. Yeah? So if you're comfortable sitting on the floor, great. If you're not, then sit on a chair. I mentioned before I'd had an operation. Actually, I've had 2 operations on my knees. So yes, let that be a warning to you. Don't. Your body has limits. Okay. Next one. As a layperson with work and family commitments, how does one develop the 4 Brahma-viharas? Well, there's a beautiful simile that's given about that in the Visuddhimagga. And as far as I know, this description in the Visuddhimagga is probably the earliest systematic attempt at talking about emotional development in psychology throughout the development of a person's life. And what it says is that when it compares the 4 Brahma-viharas to the 4 stages of development of the love that a mother has for her child. Because we always know in the Metta Sutta, and the Buddha says that the metta is like the love that a mother has for her child. And so the Visuddhimagga takes that simile up and it develops it further. And it says that when a baby is born, right, so the mother has just pure metta for the baby, right? So it's just pure love, right? It's just very simple. It's completely uncomplicated, right? There's no issues involved. It's just pure 100% love. And then as the baby grows up and the child grows up, the child will experience challenges in life and difficulties, right? They'll get sick. They'll fall over and hurt themselves. Maybe they get in a fight at school. Maybe they have to struggle to pass an exam or something like that. And then when they're experiencing those kinds of pains and sufferings that come with growing up, then the mother will feel compassion, yeah, feel karuna, feel sympathy for them. And then as they keep on growing, gradually they'll overcome those difficulties and find success in life. So maybe they graduate from school, or maybe they find a partner, a husband or wife, or they get a job or a career. And so when they have these successes in their life, then the mother feels mudita for them. Yeah? So this is appreciative joy, to rejoice in their success. And then later in life still, when they've got a family of their own and their career is established and they have their home and they have all those things that they need, and then the mother reflects that her work as a mother is done, right? And that she's done all that she can to bring the children up, so there's no need for her to be interfering and playing a part in, or not playing a part, to be trying to control the life of the child anymore. So then they have equanimity, they have upekkha. Yeah? And so that's actually a very lovely example, and it can be applied in many different cases as well. One of the interesting things about it, of course, is the role of equanimity and upekkha. Very important to notice that upekkha always comes at the end, right? Equanimity always comes at the end. Right? If when the baby is born, the mother has equanimity for the baby, right? Like whatever, then that's not going to work, is it? Right? Yeah. So the mother has to have love for the baby. Oh, yeah, I want it to be happy. Yeah. But then there comes a time when equanimity is right, yeah? And that time is when things are mature and things are going well and so on. Then you can kind of step back. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means that you're ready to step in to help whenever needed. Yeah. So actually, when we translate the word upekkha, right, Pali word upekkha, we translate that as equanimity, right? But the Pali word doesn't actually mean equanimity. The Pali word literally means watching closely. Yeah? Upa means to close, and ikha means to watch. So the literal meaning of upekkha is to watch over something, yeah? To watch closely. Yeah? So it doesn't mean to ignore it and to not care about it, but it just means to say, okay, everything's going okay. And so you just watch closely, watching over something. This is upekkha, or equanimity. So these 4 Brahma-viharas also you can apply in other kind of jobs or relationships with your family and these kinds of things. In that same kind of way, and you sort of bear that in mind. For example, you might have like a project you want to do at work, So the first thing you have to do is to have metta for the project, right? Get all the people together. Get the things together, resources together and things, and give them your love, give them positive feedback, give people encouragement and so on. And then as the project goes on, right, you encounter difficulties, you'll be scratching your head, everyone will be frustrated, people will be arguing, you won't get the things you want, so you need to have compassion, right? And then you need to, don't be saying to people, oh, you're not getting this project done fast enough, and so I have compassion. Oh, I know that you're trying, and I know that it's difficult, and we're all there with you. Yeah? And then when the project finally succeeds, then you have mudita. So you go and celebrate. Yeah, pop a bottle of champagne and go and get drunk. No, I didn't mean that, but just seeing whether you're awake. No, you celebrate by going to do a meditation retreat together, and and then finally, when everything's done, and then when the project's all smooth, then you have equanimity. You say, okay, it's all working fine. My job is done. Yeah, you're ready to come and help if need be, but you also can step back. Yeah? So you see, actually, that process of the 4 Brahma-viharas actually can be applied to anything, and it's very useful to reflect on, because it reminds us that that there isn't just one thing that works in every case. Yeah. Like these different Brahma-viharas, the different emotions that we have, they have a different role to play, and that they're suitable in different circumstances. So if we have wisdom, then we can train ourselves and we can learn what's appropriate to bring in the particular case. Yeah? This is very important, especially the role of equanimity, which comes with wisdom. And this is something that to have the wisdom to know when you can't do anything. Yeah? This is the hardest one, right? To actually be able to say, I'm not going to do anything, and it's not that I don't care, right? It's not that it's not important, but it's just that I know that there's nothing to be done. Right? There's nothing I can actually do to make things better. So then you have equanimity. That's the hardest one to do. Okay. Dear Ajahn, after meditating for 9 days, my butt really hurts. Please tell me what to do. Some walking meditation? I don't know. Yeah, it's true. What can I say? We tried doing a 3-month retreat. It's true. You get like bed sores on your butt. It's worth it though. But if the sitting meditation is a bit too painful or whatever, then just vary your posture and do some walking meditation. And especially if you're on a retreat like this, you can do as much walking meditation as you like. And just when your mind feels peaceful and calm, and then you come and sit, and then you don't have to force yourself to be sitting for too long. Okay, dear Ajahn. Okay, this is the last question, and it's a humdinger. Dear Ajahn, what would happen when all the enlightened beings have completed their mission and cease to exist? Will Buddhism cease to exist in this worldly planet? Thanks a lot. Well, this is obviously a very pertinent and pragmatic question here. What's going to happen when all beings cease to exist? You know, I had a friend when I was in Malaysia. This is actually a true story, and it's actually very sad. But I had a friend who was suffering from paranoia, and because she was a Buddhist, a student of mine, because she was a Buddhist, she suffered from Buddhist paranoia. Right? So normally Buddhist paranoia manifests itself as like, oh, the monks are reading my mind. Yeah? That's how it usually goes. They're sitting there thinking, but this one was a bit more developed than that. This poor lady really believed, in her dark moments, I don't know if she believed it all the time, but she really believed that all beings would become enlightened except for her. And she would be the only one left in the whole of samsara. And she'd just keep on getting reborn again and again and again in this empty samsara with nobody around, and there's no Buddhas to learn from. And it would just keep on going like that, on and on and on. It's terrible, isn't it? Buddhist paranoia. Yeah. So, what would happen when all the enlightened beings have completed their mission and cease to exist? Well, for the second part of the question, thank you very much. Second part of the question is much easier to answer. Will Buddhism cease to exist? Yeah, Buddhism will cease to exist at some point anyway. And this is actually, I think, one of the very refreshingly sane aspects of Buddhism. And most religions in the world have this kind of, what I think is a kind of scary and strange idea that eventually everybody's going to be converted to their religion, right? So sooner or later, everyone's either going to become a Christian or go to hell, right? And the Christians will go up to heaven, and everyone else will go to hell. So if there's this idea that somehow they're going to win, right? And everybody's going to be converted to their religion or else. But in Buddhism, we don't have that idea, and the Buddha was never unrealistic or utopian in that way. And he never said everyone's going to become a Buddhist. He never said everyone should become a Buddhist. I think the world would be very boring if everybody was a Buddhist. And but he said that Buddhist Dhamma will be around for a while. That's all, and it's just a teaching which comes. And if there are some people who are willing to listen, and then they can find freedom and liberation and happiness through that. But most people won't listen. Even most people in Buddhist countries won't listen. Even most people who have the chance to hear the Dhamma won't listen. Most people who do listen won't really practice very much because of it. It's just the way things are. There's nothing. I remember I was really confused by this when I was first started practicing, and I was in Thailand, and I did this meditation retreat. It was my first exposure to Buddhism, and I did this very intensive month-long retreat, and you're just so blown away by everything. It's just so amazing. It's the understanding of the mind, the ability to actually expand your consciousness and realize things in a way that he'd never thought possible before. It was just so revolutionary. And then I looked around myself in the Thai culture, and I was asking, why doesn't anybody care? Well, how can they have this amazing thing and just go about their lives as if nothing mattered? To me, it changed everything. And I remember I talked about this with one of my first teachers, Ajahn, and he just kind of laughed and said, "Oh, well, that's just how it is, Most people in any society, there's only a few people who are really interested in spiritual things. And that's just how it is." So Buddhism will go along for a while, and eventually it will come to an end, and that's all right. And the Buddha talked about this and said that there were things that we can do to stop Buddhism from coming to an end. Right? And the things that he said was that the things that will keep Buddhism going is when the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen and laywomen have respect and revere the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the training, right? So that means keeping precepts, and samadhi. Yeah? These 5 things that the Buddha said, this is what will keep the true Dhamma lasting a long time. Yeah? If the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen and laywomen respect the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the training and samadhi. So that means that we can do our bit to keep Buddhism lasting a little bit longer, but it's going to disappear sooner or later anyway, so there's not much we can do about that. There's a very interesting, there's some very interesting stories about how that happens. And there's one particular series of stories which is known as the Kosambi legends, which is not found in the Pali texts at all, but it would have found quite commonly in some of the Sanskrit texts. And the Kosambi story goes something like this. It's a very, very bizarre story, but it's set at some time in the future when there was a great king, and the king decided to have a great ceremony and invite all of the monks in India to come and attend the ceremony. And so that's what he did. And they had a big offering and they invited all the monks there, and when they were there they held the Uposatha, the recitation of the Patimokkha rules. And so every monk in India was there for the recitation of the Patimokkha rules. And there was even one special monk that was invited down from the Himalayan mountains, and he'd been practicing in the meditation alone in the mountains and hadn't come down for years until his students said, please come down for this special ceremony. So they all came down. And then when they held the recitation, the senior monk looked around at all of the Sangha and the thousands of monks there and said, why are we reciting the Patimokkha? Why are we pretending to be keeping the Vinaya? He says, in all my life I've never met a single monk who's interested in keeping the Vinaya. There's no monks here who keep the Vinaya rules. Buddhism is on its decline, it's on its last legs. So why do we even bother doing the recitation? And then when he said that, the monk who'd come down from the Himalayas, the meditation monk, he sort of put his hand up and said, ever since I've been ordained as a monk, I've never broken a Vinaya rule, even so much as breaking a blade of grass. And when he said that, the students of the senior-most monk got really angry. They thought that this monk was insulting their teacher. And so they got really angry with the meditation monk, and then the students of the meditation monk got really angry with the students of the senior-most monk, and they got in a fight, and the fight went really nasty, and they ended up killing each other, and all of the monks died. And that's how Buddhism came to an end in India. And the king who'd called for the ceremony walked around and he looked at all the dead monks and he said, oh, I feel so ashamed that it was under my rule that Buddhism came to an end. So that's a bit of a funny story, isn't it? But anyway, there's a wonderful book written about that series of stories called Once Upon a Future Time by Ajahn Natia, who's an excellent American Buddhist scholar. So if you're interested to know more about Buddhist, this is like to think about the Buddhist imagination of how Buddhists as a community have thought that their religion would come to an end. And you might think it's completely crazy that monks would end up murdering each other because of a disagreement about keeping the Vinaya over whether you're broken a blade of glass, but then you probably haven't lived in a monastery. So what can I say? So anyway, but there, regardless of those particular details, but there's always been a consciousness in the Buddhist tradition that Buddhism will come to an end. There's a series of predictions about when that would happen. One of the interesting things is that, of course, in the lifetime of the Buddha, right, nobody really expected Buddhism to last as long as it has. Okay? We kind of take it for granted that Buddhism's been around for 2,500 years, right? But that's incredibly unusual and incredibly unlikely. I mean, you look at all of the accidents of history that's happened, that's kept that going. I mean, we know Buddhism came to an end in India. We know multiple times it's been wiped out in Sri Lanka and it's been wiped out in Thailand, all of these different places, and then it's come back again. And there's so many different accidents of history that have sort of worked together to be able to continue the Dhamma till the present day. And when we look back at how in the early Buddhist texts, how people thought about the ending of Buddhism, of course the earliest prediction was that Buddhism would die in 500 years. Right? And then 500 years sort of came up, and then after 500 years you find a whole bunch of new texts come up saying, oh no, Buddhism will last 1,000 years. Right? And then they come up to 1,000 years, and then there's a whole bunch of new texts that say, oh no, Buddhism is going to last for 2,500 years. Yeah, so now it's 2,500 years, so Buddhism's still around, and doesn't look like it's going anywhere immediately, so maybe we'll be around for another 2,500 years. Or another 10,000 years, who knows? I personally, I'm a bit biased, as you might imagine, but I think that Buddhism is as relevant as ever, in fact perhaps more so. And when I look at all of the difficulties and problems in the world, and you see how simple most of those problems are to solve if you have a little bit of Dhamma. I mean, really. We look at the big challenges that's facing us in our generation. There's something like climate change, for example, right? Well, we all talk about this, and it's all so political and all of this stuff, and, well, a little bit of contentment, actually, and the climate change thing is not a problem anymore. It's only a problem because of greed, right? If people just be a bit content and say, oh, I don't mind actually having a bit less, right? Then it would be okay. Yeah? We'd be able to solve the problem easily. Yeah? And same, so many of these other things, the violence and the conflict you see in the world, and you think, well, maybe just a bit of loving kindness, a bit of forgiveness, yeah? A bit of acceptance. And these are the things that are going to solve conflicts in the world, not building more bombs and all of these kinds of things. And people are crazy. So I don't know, it seems to me that there's just as much need for the Dhamma now as there has been ever, in fact, probably more so. So, but I still haven't answered the question about when all beings will get enlightened. The Buddha was asked this question once, and it's actually discussed directly in one of the suttas in the Pali Canon. And somebody comes and says to the Buddha, are all beings going to become enlightened, or only part of them, or what's the case? And the Buddha didn't say anything. And as Venerable Ananda was sitting next to him, and Ananda thought he should answer the question, because the man might misunderstand, and he said, the Buddha isn't concerned with the question about whether all beings are going to become enlightened or not. Right? He's not interested in that question. But what the Buddha knows is that of those beings that become enlightened, all of them will do so by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. That will come by abandoning the 5 hindrances, by developing the 4 satipatthanas, yeah? And by developing all of the factors of the path. That's the way to get enlightened. And so the purpose of the Buddha's teachings is to teach people how to get enlightened. Okay? What you do with that, it's up to you. Yeah? All right. Okay. Dear Ajahn, how should we deal with jealousy? Jealousy. I don't know. How do you deal with jealousy? I'm just trying to think. I remember when I was at university, and I had a new girlfriend, and we were at some party or something like that, and I saw her talking to some other guy. Right? I mean, they were just chatting or something. It wasn't very, very innocent, and I felt this kind of pang of jealousy when I saw that. Right? And I just immediately thought, that's really stupid, and then it just went away and it didn't come back again. So I don't know, I guess maybe I'm just not a very jealous person, I don't know. Sorry?
To get rid of jealousy,
become a monk. Exactly, become a monk and get enlightened. Yeah, that's how to get rid of jealousy. Yeah. So I mean, I think the underlying thing of jealousy is that you think that you own things, right? So if you're jealous of a person or something like that, you think you have some kind of right to something, you have some entitlement. Yeah? And so you just have to reflect that actually you're not entitled to anything, really. Everything that you have is a gift. Right? The world doesn't owe you a living, it doesn't owe you a family, it doesn't owe you anything. And so all of those things that we have out of gratitude. We have because of the hard work and the efforts and of everyone around us, and because of nature, and because of all of these things. And sometimes when those things are challenged, you feel jealous. But how many times did you feel gratitude for having those things? Right? Isn't that much better? If you have, let's say you have somebody who loves you. Yeah, maybe you have someone who loves you for a day. Shouldn't you feel grateful for that? You shouldn't think, aren't there lots of people who don't have anybody to love them today? And maybe that person who loves you today, tomorrow, they're going to go and love someone else. Right? Are you going to feel jealous? You should feel happy for them. Oh, that person's, they're loving someone, so they're happy, and the person who's being loved, they feel happy because they feel like I did yesterday. Yeah? So it's good. Yeah, so don't be selfish about it. We're not owed anything. The world doesn't want us to. The world just is. We're just here. So why go around being jealous about things? We have so many things to be grateful for. That's a much better use of our time. Okay. All right, dear Ajahn, if there is a person with ill will who behaves inappropriately towards me in a group of friends, and I prefer not to be socializing with that person, what's the best way to deliver the message in the Buddhist way? Thank you. Okay. Well, the best way to deliver the message in a Buddhist way is clearly and kindly, not passive-aggressively, right? And this is something which you find often happens in Buddhism, that people sometimes have this holier-than-thou kind of thing. Oh yes, I'm so kind and I'm so full of metta and so on. And of course, if only you were as full of metta as I am, then you'd be able to see things this clearly, or something like that. So we have all these kind of ways of talking passively, aggressively, and getting around the subject and so on, and that doesn't really help very much. So it's much nicer to be straightforward and be kind and just straightforward with somebody. And if someone's behaviour is upsetting you, then you just say to that person, look, I'm sorry. Please don't get angry or something. But I just find your behaviour upsetting. And if you want to deal with it, you can deal with it. If you don't want to deal with it, then you say, look, please, I'd just rather not deal with it. And sometimes you just need to draw a boundary, right? And drawing boundaries is very useful. Yeah? And you just say, look, please, I'd just rather if you didn't call me. I'd just rather if you didn't contact you. Look at what is that circumstance. Maybe it's at work. Maybe somebody comes and bothers you at work, and you say, look, please I'd rather if you didn't. And not get into an argument with them about it. You just say, I understand your point of view, but this is the boundary that I'm putting, and just please don't cross it. And it's okay to do that, right? Again, it's that thing. Remember that thing of equanimity. So equanimity is like you don't have to solve everybody's problems, yeah. So the Buddha said there were some of his. He said that sometimes horse trainers have to shoot their horses. Yeah, he says same too. Sometimes I have to shoot my students. So when he said, when I kill my students, what it means is that I don't give them any teachings. I don't give them any advice. Yeah, because they're not listening. Yeah, and it's not because the Buddha was lacking metta or lacking compassion. It's not because he was lacking wisdom, right? It's just because actually they weren't listening. And so sometimes you have to do that and just have the confidence, right, to be able to say, I've tried. I've done what I can out of metta and out of loving kindness, and this is enough. Actually, I went through an experience like that just recently. I've had to go to the police in New South Wales because I had a stalker. Yes, monks get stalkers too. And it's actually quite common. I don't know if the monks here have had stalkers, but a lot of monks do. Ajahn Brahma had one, and most of the senior monks end up having a stalker sooner or later. And so this was a cyber stalker. right, who'd come onto my blog and leave up to 100 comments per day on my blog, which I have to go through and delete. Sujato is an evil, murdering, rapist, bastard, and so on and so forth. On and on and on. This person I've never met, by the way. So, obviously she's crazy. And after sort of trying to put up with it and trying to deal with it for many months, eventually it was just too much. So I went to the New South Wales Police, and again, it's just a matter of drawing boundaries, And so hopefully we can try to do something to make her stop. But if someone's behaving in that way, it's obviously not beneficial for them to be able to keep behaving in that way. Yeah? So you don't do it out of ill will. I don't have any ill will for that person. I just want them to stop being silly, and stop harming themselves, and to get some help if they can be helped at all. That's all I want. So don't be afraid to draw some boundaries. Yeah. Okay. Can you get into Jhana while you can still hear the surrounding sound? No, you cannot. If you're hearing sound, you're not in jhanas. So, Typically what you'll find when you go into meditation, it's kind of weird. Meditation is a strange thing, but when your mind goes peaceful and you go into deeper meditation, you find, on the one hand, you're less aware of sounds, right? Your mind is so immersed in the meditation that sounds don't really have any impact. But at the same time, when you do become aware of sounds, then they're much louder. Like you can hear, like the ticking of a clock can become like thunderously loud and so on. And so when the process, when your mind's becoming settled, then you can go through different phases where the sound can be very disturbing, right? And it might be just a little thing. It might be just a creak of a tree or the sound of the wind or something like that, and then that can become very disturbing. But that's just something that's just like your reaction to it or your response to it. And so but that's like anything else in meditation, that's conditioned, and you can train yourself to respond to the sound in a more without getting caught up in it. I did this meditation thing. We had this thing in Sydney we called MedMob. MedMob's like, what a flash mob is? Like a flash mob where you organise over the Facebook or whatever, and you come together and everyone does a dance or something like that. So you have MedMob, where you do the same thing except you all meditate together, right? And so we have MedMob. If you're interested, you should do it in Hong Kong. And it's actually an international networking group. You can just Google MedMob and set up your own local MedMob group and go and sit meditation. It's really good. And we did one in Sydney. And we were sitting near in the domain, in the park that's next to the Opera House, right? So overlooking Sydney Harbour. Sounds very nice, doesn't it? Yeah. Except they put us on. We were on the side of the park that's next to the freeway, right? So you had all the freeway and all the city noise, and we were just next to the Opera House. And it so happened that week they were demolishing the steps at the Opera House. So it was all these big machines and demolition crews and smashing and stuff, and that we were all sitting there meditation, and it was just unbelievable racket going on all around us. We were sitting there, and so I just thought, okay, just give in to it. So I just sat there and just listened. I just meditated on the sound for an hour, and you just listen to it, and you realize actually, when there's this resistance, but then when you give up that resistance, it just takes a little while. The sound just goes through you, and you realize it's not a big deal. Yeah, it just sort of washes through you, and you don't have any problem with it. So that's something, if you're finding that the sound is really annoying to you, it's difficult, then, just do that. Go and sit in a demolition site or sit by the side of a freeway or something like that and just say, I'm going to sit here and meditate until the sound doesn't bother me anymore. Yeah? And then you just sit there until you meditate. And then when you go home or whatever, it'll be incredibly quiet. Yeah. So don't worry about it, but your mind will find peace when you'll be able to let go of the sound. Okay. Can meditation help me to make the right choice and to choose the right one, the right partner? How? Thanks a lot. You want me to find your right partner for you? Really? I'm not sure that you're asking the right person here. I'm obviously have have completely failed at that myself, so I don't know whether that's a good recommendation. But anyway, yes, it will. Of course it will. And it will help you to do everything better in your life. Yeah? One of the things that you find in meditation is that, you see, we get so distracted by all of the rubbish, right? And it's like you're watching telly or something like that, and there's all these stupid ads ongoing, and there's all this noise and all of this kind of crap, and it's very hard to make any sense out of it, and it's very hard to know what's important and what's not important. And so when you meditate, even if you meditate just for a little bit, you let your mind become a little bit peaceful, then things will settle down, and those things that are of value will remain. Okay? This is how meditation tends to go. The things which are of least value go first, and then those things that are more value will tend to come up. I had a friend of mine in Sydney, Giles. He taught his father to meditate, and his dad meditated for like 5 minutes a day, and he said that his main thing that his meditation is useful for is for doing the crossword. And if he's ever stuck on a crossword puzzle answer, he'll just meditate, and then the answer will come to him. Yeah? So that's really good. Yeah? This is what the Buddha said. He said, when the mind is peaceful, then you'll know and see things as they really are. Yeah? Even the answers to crossword puzzles. Yeah? So your mind's peaceful, and from that peaceful mind, wisdom comes. Now, if you only have a very little bit of peace of mind, then you get a little bit of wisdom. Right? Like the answer to a crossword puzzle. Right? If you have a bit more peace of mind, you get a bit more wisdom. And that wisdom will apply in any sphere of life, anything that you're doing. If you're doing creative work, if you're doing, trying to get along with people, or anything that you're doing, then when your mind becomes peaceful, the answer will come to you. Yeah? And it will be the same thing in your relationships with people. And when your mind becomes peaceful, then the answer will come to you. Is this the right person? Am I making the right choice? And you'll know at a deep level. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to think about it. Right? In fact, it's best you don't think about it. Stop thinking. Stop trying to work out the answer. Very often, with these kinds of things, we know the answer already. Right? We already know the answer, but it's allowing that answer to come to the surface and allowing it to present itself to us. This is the thing. Not many people know that when we talk in Buddhism about rebirth and so on, people think that this is a Indian idea, but actually in ancient Greece, the ancient Greek philosophers all believed in rebirth as well. Aristotle, Pythagoras, and Plato, and so on. And Socrates not only believed in rebirth, and this is something which, because I studied Western philosophy, but Western philosophers tend to sort of gloss over this, right? And this is something that I was never actually taught in my philosophy classes, and I only found out by actually reading the Socrates dialogues, right, where he talks about it. But in fact, Socrates' entire philosophy of knowledge and wisdom is based on the idea of rebirth, right? It's not merely an incidental idea that he happened to have, but it was fundamental to his whole approach in philosophy. If you're familiar with Socratic philosophy at all, you know that's what they call the Socratic method. And the Socratic method is basically using a series of questions and answers in order to be able to draw out the implications of things, right? So you take a certain idea and then you draw out the implications and so on. And Socrates used specifically that method because he believed that we had already known all the answers in our past lives. He believed that in our past lives we had learnt all knowledge that there was to learn, right? That we'd been born through so many countless past lives. And so the purpose of philosophy was to draw out that wisdom which we already have. Yeah? And in fact, the word we have in English, the word education, right? You think about the etymology of the word education, right? Education literally means to draw out, and that's where it comes from, right? So the root, from the root duct, right? So to duct something, and to educt is to draw out, yeah? So to educate is to draw out the wisdom that a person has. That's where the basic meaning of it comes from. Of course, these days it's exactly the opposite, isn't it, right? Education means to stuff in. Yeah, so you kind of stuff in knowledge into somebody and pound it in. Yeah, but that's not what it was meant to be. To draw out. Yeah, and so Socrates used that method of analysis and inference to draw out. But from a Buddhist point of view, yes, that kind of thing has some application, has some benefit, but it's still at a fairly shallow level. And the real wisdom is drawn out when you come to the peaceful mind. Yeah? And when your mind is peaceful, the wisdom just comes naturally. Okay. Okay, so someone said, I feel confused because I didn't see any lights during my meditation. Well, the switch is over there. I don't know. Is it true that if I don't see lights, I cannot get into jhana? What is true is that if you worry about things, you're not going to get into jhana. I know that's true. If you sit there thinking, is this jhana or is this not jhana, then you're not going to get into jhana. If you sit there thinking, is this the light? When am I going to get the light? Where's the light? Hang on, is that the light? Oh no, the sun's just come up. Oh, that's not the real light. Then you're not going to get into jhana. You get into jhana, wo sagga rammanang karitva labhati samadhing labhati citta sakyagatang. Based on, or relying on letting go, that one gains unification, one gains oneness of mind. Yeah? Based on letting go. Yeah? So don't worry about all of these things. Don't worry about nimittas and lights and things like that. Actually, none of these things are important. The only thing that really matters is being able to let go. If you can let go, everything will go smoothly. And, we only talk about those other things. You know why we talk about all those other things? Because otherwise we wouldn't have anything to talk about. It'd be really boring. You've got to talk about something, right? So, you've got to talk about jhanas and nimittas and samadhi, and everyone goes, wow, that sounds really cool, and they go off and meditate. But really it doesn't matter. You think about this wonderful story when the Bodhisattva was just a boy and he was sitting under the rose apple tree. And then he went into jhanas, yeah? And he didn't know anything about nimittas, he didn't know anything about meditation methods and samadhi and jhana factors and all of those things, but he went into jhana all right. And, you might think that, that's just a legend or it's a myth or it's just something special happened to the Bodhisattva or something like that. But I disagree. To me, I'm quite happy to think that many of the stories which are told of the Buddha's life are, just myths and legends and so on. But that particular detail, to me, always has the ring of truth. And one of the reasons why is because I've spoken to so many people who've had similar experiences. Yeah? And it's not just the Bodhisattva who's had those experiences. Many people have similar experiences. And there's probably people in the room who've had similar experiences. So somehow just going into this place and you don't know how or why or where or what's going on. I remember I had one of my students when I was in Malaysia, staying in Ipoh, and he told me this, that he wanted to learn how to meditate. And he went round to all of the Chinese temples and asked them all about meditation, and nobody could give him any answers. Right? Nobody knew anything about meditation. He didn't know how to meditate. And anyway, he got fed up with all that and he decided, okay, I'll just do it. And he was in this one Chinese temple and there was this hall there, and he said it was like a really hot, stinking hot day, and there was lots of mosquitoes around, and he was just sitting on this bare concrete floor, and there was building going on next door, so there was like banging and noise and stuff like that. And when he was telling this story, you could see he got so excited telling this story. He's saying, I went inside. And his English wasn't very good. He couldn't describe it very clearly, but you could see that he obviously had some very profound samadhi experience. Probably it was in a jhana or something like that. And he didn't know anything about meditation. Yeah? He'd never been able to do it again. Only at one time. Yeah? Yeah? This is Vosagara Manankaritva. He just let go. He wasn't trying to get anything. He wasn't worrying about nimittas and stages and lights and all of those things. Just let go. Right. Okay, so dear Ajahn, the more you practice meditation, the more mindful you should become. So if I have a busy work life, I need to remember so many things and do so many tasks at the same time. How can I be mindful? Thanks. How can meditation help? Well, how can meditation help? I'm not sure that that's the right question to ask. If you look at the way that the Buddha structured his Eightfold Path, right? We begin with right view, right? So right view is what we're doing here, right? We're developing our right view. We're asking questions, listening to answers, thinking about the Dhamma, reflecting about it, so we're developing right view. And then there's like right intention. Yeah, so you develop the intention of giving and kindness and compassion and so on, and you try to orientate everything you do so that it will be in line with those values, right? And then you develop right speech, right action, right livelihood, 3 factors of sila. Yeah? Nothing about meditation so far, okay? So in the Eightfold Path, the meditation is like the highest parts of the path. Meditation is the subtle parts of the path, yeah? And it's not the purpose of meditation to support those other things. Okay? It's not the purpose of the subtle things. You don't do subtle things in order to support the coarse things. You do the coarse things in order to support the subtle things. Right? The earlier factors of the path are there to support the later factors, and not so much the other way around. Of course, that's not 100% like that. Of course, meditation will help. But I'm just saying that I don't mean to say that meditation is not going to help you do those things. I'm just more interested to reframe the question to ask, how can you use your busy work life in order to support your meditation? Yeah? Now that's more interesting, right? Right? And you see, why is it interesting to look at it that way? Because there's a kind of perception, an underlying perception that there's something wrong with having a busy work life, right? And that what I'm doing is something wrong with it. Therefore, I've got to try to fix it. And this is something that's become very popular these days. We have this kind of corporate meditation, right? And I do one of the things that I do is I help to teach a course on Buddhism and psychotherapy, and we've done things. I got asked to be part of a seminar on Buddhism and mindfulness in the corporate world. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about the corporate world. And then I was thinking, hang on, no, I belong to the world's oldest multinational corporation, is the Sangha, right? The world's oldest and most successful multinational. So we've learned a thing or two about mindfulness in corporate life. Okay, so that's good. So that's what I did. But you find this is very popular now, right? And you have, for example, in Australia, they had the CEO of, I think it was the ANZ Bank, one of the big Australian banks, was an enthusiastic meditator. So they had an unused bank vault in the headquarters in Melbourne, and so they turned that into a meditation room, so they could all go downstairs underneath in the quiet and meditate. So that was quite good, isn't it? Yeah? And these things happen all the time. I had some friends in Sydney who run the Sydney Gay Meditation Group, and they were looking for a venue to hold their meditation sessions on, and they went to one of the venues in the King's Cross area. It was actually the Sydney Swans, what do they call it? Sydney Swans Clubhouse, and for the football team. And they said, can we use one of your rooms to have a meditation? And the manager said, you can have the whole top floor, I'll give it to you for free. And she was really into meditation as well. And so many of these things happen where you find in the corporate world that people are really into meditation. And another good example, of course, is Google, where they've not only done so much things in meditation, but they run their own meditation courses, and they've even built a big walking meditation hall as part of the Googleplex, right? So they don't do that because they're Buddhists, right? They don't do it because of devotion to the Triple Gem, right? They do it because it'll make them more money. Yeah, simple as that, right? Get the workers happy, right? Get them creative, make their minds clear. They'll do better work. They make more money, right? so that's all fine and that's all good. But I had this interesting conversation once at this Buddhism and psychotherapy course that I do. And one of the students on the course was a psychologist who works in the corporate world. And his particular field that he would work on is he would do contract work for companies who had, usually the people he would deal with would be people who were so-called high-functioning individuals. So these would be like the bosses or the CEOs and so on, who are basically having a midlife crisis. And they'd hit like their mid-40s or 50s or something like that. And somehow they couldn't work the way that they used to. And so they'd send him to this psychologist, and basically he was being paid to get them back working the way that they used to. But he said that what he usually found out was that what was actually happening was that they were becoming conscious. This was the problem. They were actually growing up. They were actually becoming less narcissistic. Right? They'd actually reached a point in their life where they were looking around themselves and thinking, last year we sacked 500 workers because we could make an extra 2% profit. And I don't want to do that this year, actually. And they started to think about, well, what does that mean for the families of those people? And shouldn't we be actually more concerned with looking after people and in maximising our profits? And that's why they stopped being so high functioning. So his job was to close all that down and get them working again. So of course this is a great dilemma for him, and it's not easy. So of course he doesn't want to, actually what they're doing is growing. And so he's tried to facilitate that so that they can actually continue to do their job, right? But actually do it in a more ethical way, a more conscious way, a more compassionate way. So this is something to think about with your work. If you're thinking, oh, my work is so busy, there's nothing wrong with being busy, right? If you think about what actually are you doing, like what's your purpose of what you're doing? The Buddha put right livelihood as one of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, now right livelihood means that you're doing some kind of job that at least doesn't cause harm. Right, at the very least, yeah, and hopefully is actually going to be beneficial, right? And doing some kind of job that's going to be beneficial, it's actually going to be good. And if you do a job that's actually good, that actually helps people, right, then that's one of the factors of the Eightfold Path. It's not something which is a distraction from the Eightfold Path. It's actually it's essential that you have something like that can help you to develop the Eightfold Path, right? So, in the Sangha, then of course we're very lucky because we have, a very wonderful livelihood, and we have great opportunity to do many good things like teaching Dhamma and building monasteries and helping people and doing all of these things. And so we have a great opportunity to do that, and then we use that in our meditation, right? You don't think, oh, this is a distraction. I don't think, oh, I'm coming here to talk to you lot. Oh, they've had so many talks from Ajahn Brahma over the last week. Haven't they got it already? What am I coming and doing? I would be much happier going off to my kuti and doing some meditation. I'm going to be so distracted by coming and answering all of these silly questions tonight. Right? So if I think like that, then yes, that's going to be an obstacle. But I don't think like that. I think, oh, actually it's great to come and have a chance to talk Dhamma and to be able to, it's challenging for me to trying to think of a good way to answer questions. And so if you think about your job like that, actually, is what you're doing beneficial? Now, most jobs, actually, you can find things that are beneficial in them, right? But I think one of the problems is that, people always talk about busyness. I don't think, of course, busyness is an issue, but I don't think, a bigger issue, I think, is meaning. And I think a bigger problem with people's work is they don't feel there's any meaning to it. What's the point, right? And I think this has been worsened a lot by the labour practices which has been happened, especially the last 2 or 3 decades, where there's so little security in people's jobs, when the company has no loyalty to its workers anymore. Right? I mean, traditionally that's how it would be, wouldn't it? Your company and the workers would have a close relationship, and you'd expect to work for that company for your whole life, and people would actually look after you, and that was considered the responsibility. And now everybody's on contract. I don't know what it's like in Hong Kong, but I can't imagine that it's any better. Right? Everyone's on contract. You just do it for a couple of years. The company has no loyalty to you. The company couldn't care less, and they'll just get rid of you and get somebody who's younger, and they have to pay less. And so you're thinking, well, actually, what's the purpose of this? Yeah. So this, of course, will vary a lot depending on what you're doing, right? And if you're lucky enough to have a job where you can actually see the benefit of what you're doing, that's great. You know, maybe you can work as a teacher or as a nurse or something like that, where you can actually work with people on a one-to-one basis and really see the benefit. And that's fantastic if you can do that. If you're working as, you know, an accountant in a big firm or something like that, it's much harder to see what's the point, right? And you've become so distanced from things. So that's something I think is useful to reflect on, is to think, well, how can I bring that sense of meaning into my livelihood, right? So how can I make what I'm doing in my work as beneficial as possible for as many people, right? Now, maybe you can change things, maybe you can't, maybe you have different choices that you can make. But, you know, I think there's always something that we can do. And something that I have been recommending to people for the last year or two is that everybody should start a meditation group in their workplace. Right? That's a good thing to do, isn't it? Yeah, it's not that difficult. All you need to do is get a place and a time, right? Tuesday's lunchtime, something like that, and find some spare room or something in your offices, and then you just put some signs up or whatever. You tell the bosses or whatever what you're doing, and then you put some signs up and saying, "Well, come and sit meditation." You don't have to teach meditation if you don't want to. You can ask people if they come, do you want teachings or something, and then you can maybe play some tapes or whatever. But otherwise, you can just create the space and everybody can come and sit in meditation together. And it's not difficult to do. It means that you have some discipline, that you get the chance to do it. And I can guarantee you that you'll find other people at your workplace who want to do that, yeah, and who want to come and meditate. I have a friend one of my students in Canberra who does this. He works at the Department of Defence in Canberra. And so when he wanted to do this, initially they weren't really sure about it. And the funniest thing about him was that he had to do an occupational health and safety report before they would allow him to run a meditation group. This is in the Department of Defence, right? So these are guys who are driving around, you know, throwing bombs and shooting things and jumping out of airplanes, and for getting a dozen people to sit on some chairs in a room for half an hour, he had to get a OH&S form and fill it in. Well, perhaps they might fall off their chair, I don't know. So, you know, and he just did that. And now he's found a year or two later, they're actually asking him if he will teach courses on meditation for the Department of Defence. Yeah? And people have seen that it really has benefit. Yeah? So if you just take that initiative, then you'll see the results. And so that's one way that you can both help to support your own meditation practice, but also to bring a sense of meaning into what you're doing in your job. Yeah. So that's the short answer to that question is, rather than worrying too much about what meditation will do for your job, think about what your job can do for your meditation. That's the most important thing. Yeah? But of course the meditation will still improve your work. It'll make you happier and so on, but that's good. Okay, people said that chanting attracts ghosts, so don't do chanting at home. Is that true? Have you ever seen one? Yes? No? Did they get attracted by chanting? I don't know. I think if they're coming for the chanting, they must be good ghosts. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Yeah. That's the last question over here. So, what's the time? Do we have a time? Oh, 9:41. Oh, quite late already.